You're listening to The Donor Doctor Show, where your host, James Newberry, will help you improve the health of your fundraising. Now over to James.
Hello, this is The Donor Doctor, and I'm here with my old friend Stuart MacLean.
Hey.
And we're here to talk about Claude Hopkins. Now, Claude Hopkins was the hero of two people we've done podcasts for, David Ogilvy and Herschel Gordon Lewis. And they both cite him as their mentor. Claude Hopkins was born in 1866, died in 1932, so he's really a giant in the whole field of advertising. He wrote a book, two books actually, My Life in Advertising and Scientific Advertising, and they're probably...
classics.
They're classics, really, yes. And interesting thing about his background, both his parents were college graduates. His dad died when he was young. His mother was very frugal, very religious, and he was going to be a preacher. That's what they were kind of like grooming him to be. There was a couple episodes that kind of turned him off in life. One was he was going to see Uncle Tom's Cabin, and they ran by a minister who said, there's nothing wrong with that play, but then the kids may go to the theater because they get a liking for that. So he kind of rebelled. He was a preacher, but he preached a sermon that his mom didn't care for, so there was kind of a rift. But that's how he got into advertising. The values of his mom, though, were always something very important to him. Hard work. He was really a workaholic. He'd work around the clock to the point of exhaustion later in life. So the values were there. The two books, as I mentioned, were My Life in Advertising and Scientific Advertising that we know today. So that's where we learned. And the other thing we know about him is that Albert Lasker, who had one of the big advertising firms, paid him around $4.5 million to work for him in today's dollars. So it gives you an idea of how well he was thought of. Usually people don't pay that much money for talent. Have you ever gotten paid that much?
Not yet. I probably should.
with runaway inflation is my only hope for... It was $185,000 in 1907. That's what $4.5 million is today. Here are some of the things that advice that I read in My Life in Advertising. He was best with common folks because that's who he was raised around. He's not like a David Ogilvy who could sell Rolls Royces. He believed in the power of demonstrations and free samples. And we just had lunch, and you saw the power of a free sample. You got a little bit of wine, and then you bought a glass of wine.
That's right. I wouldn't have bought it otherwise.
That's an example of that. He thought it was ridiculous that these old guys would know what a housewife would want. So he thought that was foolish. He thought it was also a mistake to judge others by ourselves. Everything must be submitted to the court of public opinion. He learned this the hard way. He was trying to sell these detective stories door to door, and nobody was really interested in them. He said, real men judge us by our love of work. He says there's a dearth of talented people. I think that's probably true from what I've read. More profit in expanding sales than decreasing costs. And I think that's true in business. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Sometimes cutting costs, you're cutting the wrong things. You're cutting the good people that can increase your revenue or taking away their incentives. Right. I know a lady who worked for Western Union, and they were protected for years and years by the government as a monopoly.
Right.
And then next thing I knew from her coming to see me to sell her products for direct marketing, she was disgusted that the new way of going about things there was they were going to cut her incentive as a way to save money. Mm-hmm. If anything, they should have increased her incentive.
Yeah, there's more upside than there is. I do think you should be careful about cost, but there's just more upside. Number 6, he said, tell the truth. He gave an example of a company, and he said, we're going bankrupt. Now, of course, that's commonplace now, and people have even gotten cynical. You've seen companies that seem to go out of business all the time. But at that time, it was revolutionary, and it really worked. And the reason it worked was the truth was such a rarity that it caused a sensation. He said even selling like these Macintoshes that were a little bit rotten, say that. And people thought, well, they must be, so even in that example. one of his first big breaks was he was selling Bissell carpet sweepers as a Christmas present. He came up with that idea. And he mailed 5,000 letters to, I guess, stores around the nation, offering them.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up with the idea of offering them in different woods. Of course, he got resistance from the inventor, who said he should talk about the patent dumping devices and psycho bearings. Could you imagine that?
Yeah, that's more of the inventor's pride.
Well, yeah, I mean,
but it's not what I care about.
Certainly not. I mean, psycho bearings when you're buying a vacuum. No, you don't care about the psycho bearings. So it was the one of the ideas he came up with was one of the woods was vermilion, came from India, and he came up with a story appeal that it was it floated down the Ganges, so it was of interest to people.
He also, in his displays, only had a couple of those sweepers, of the ones.
Because they were harder to get. Yeah,
and he wanted that exclusivity element there.
He sold more with 1 cent letter than 14 full-time salesmen, and that's why somebody might be worth so much more than another person, because of the ability to do that. He then worked for a meat packer, and one of their big businesses was something called Koto Suet. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's basically a lard, which was cheaper than butter. And his idea for selling it was he came up with the largest cake in the world. And apparently 105,000 people came to see it. He'd pay the newspaper boys to hawk it.
I wouldn't want to eat it, though.
No, I don't think so either. Some people said that wasn't really good advertising. Good advertising is supposed to be dignified or something like that. That was their problem. Now, eventually, the consumer market, they were fine selling this, their brand. But among bakers, they knew that it was no different than the non-brand lard. And he's having a hard time there. So he came up with two things there. One, he put the picture of the pie on a photograph, real nice, and said sponsored by Koto Suet.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, he put the guy's name of the company, his picture and name on the side of a railroad car that was going from New York to Chicago. So he appealed to his vanity. But in both cases, he gave something beyond. He tried to help somebody's needs. By putting those pictures in there of the baked good, he's helping him sell more of those cakes. And then the fact is his product was a little bit more expensive, wasn't a problem. Another example, he worked for Schlitz beer. And at that time, people would just say that their beer was pure, but they really didn't explain the brewing process. And he was the first to do that. Now, I know you worked a lot in wineries. And he said that it's possible that if you're too close to something, you probably wouldn't explain it because everybody does it that way. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of technical things that I've heard winemakers talk about, and they don't know how to talk to consumers.
It's called the curse of expertise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I remember there was a guy who was a teetotaler, and he heard the description of how pure, the process, the brewing process, and he ordered beer right there because he just wanted to. And they were all doing this. They all could have said the same thing, but he was the first.
And as I recall that story, it's been a long time since I've read the book, but the guy was reading it in a periodical, the ad in a periodical, while he was on a train.
Right.
And he was so impressed that he had to order it right then and there on the train.
Right.
So I think that says a lot.
Well, they went from, when he got the account, Schlitz was number 5. And within a few months, they were tied for first. So this advertising was very powerful. He found something that perhaps if he had known more about brewing wouldn't have, used. He said, oh, that's nothing unique. But he knew that the average person, because he was kind of like new to it, he found it interesting. He thought the average person wasn't. He was correct about that, of course. Cosmetics. He found an old actress, Edna Wallace Hopper, who had aged really well. And she lectured on beauty, and he helped. He developed a line of cosmetics. She was like a silent era actress, so that was what he used. Shoe membership. This idea actually didn't work so well because there was a fair amount of returns, which ate up. But the idea would you would buy like a dozen shoes a year or something like that, or half dozen. You have to factor. Of course, we talked about this in our fundraising. Sometimes you have a premium. You have to the shipping, or there's some cost you don't think about. In this case, it was returns that kind of ate up his. That wasn't one of his better ideas. He said the two biggest flaws of advertising are boast and selfishness. I think that's probably true, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think just being boring.
Oh, boring, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. He likes a secret gift. Now, we have never done that. A secret gift is something to consider.
Well, I've seen recently, we all get these in the mail, the Publishers Clearinghouse things, right. And I saw recently that they have a secret gift. You know, if you put in an order, you would get this secret item.
Do you know what it was?
Yeah, because I put in an order.
And what'd you get?
But it wasn't to get the secret gift. I saw something there that I wanted.
Yeah.
So I totally forgot about it.
And what was your secret gift when you got it?
It was some plastic kitchen utensils.
Okay, did you like it? Or?
They were okay. There might have been a turkey baster in there and a few other things. I didn't have much in the way of expectations, and they delivered that.
Well, anyway, people, there's a curiosity factor there. I mean, you could have a nice gift. It could be a fast response bonus. It could be a secret gift. Or you could tell them what they want and then give them something else too.
That's a big thing. One of the things I learned, I'm glad you brought up the fast response bonus, because I've taken that from when I worked for a newsletter publisher who would give somebody, if they subscribed to their financial or health newsletter, an extra report as a fast response bonus. And people wanted that information. And you can do the same thing in fundraising.
Oh, absolutely.
You can have or membership and have a fast response bonus, but have a reason for having the fast response bonus. Don't just say, "Oh, we'll send you X, Y, and we'll send you the turkey baster."
Right, sure.
You know, have a reason. The election's coming, or we have to have so much money down before we break, the foundation hole, for the museum or something.
We said platitudes and generalities don't work, like most economical, best in the world. And the problem is that people discount it. It may not hurt you that much, but they have a hard time believing anything else you say. A quality, committed to quality or something like this.
Well, we see the same thing every political campaign, don't we, from candidates?
Yes,
people just tune it out.
Yeah. He doesn't like businesses that frequently switch agencies. He says they're kind of never happy. It's like not worth the investment. It's like more of a cost for the agency than it is for the business, because you spend so much time developing a line or something like that.
And people getting expertise in your staff.
Right.
It's kind of, they're if you go to the horse area, the kind of the barn jumpers, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who wants that? Somebody's going to be disgruntled.
I used to be in the horse business. There are absolutely people that are barn jumpers. They're never happy. There really are people that exist like this.
They're just belligerent.
And sometimes I would even call for references and not allow them. Some people had such a bad reputation for this. So it is, these are people to avoid. Now, he said something interesting. I'm not sure you agree with this. He says agencies get better over time because of the accumulation of knowledge. I guess there is a certain amount of this, but it seems to me sometimes they go up and down. It seems when that person leaves, that often the knowledge isn't left behind. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's certainly true, but my thing is sometimes agency egos step in.
Right.
And if somebody low on the totem pole is having some success with something, that sometimes it's just personalities. People feel threatened by it, and they don't want to believe that such and such works, even though they see the test data. So they'll explain it away as an anomaly of some sort.
He was big into coupons, obviously. I don't know if that would work as well in what we do. I can't think of application into fundraising.
No, I can't either for a coupon.
But he said advertising is multiplied salesmanship. Now, certainly what we do, direct mail fundraising, is multiplied. salesmanship.
Oh, even to a very high degree, because usually we're not selling toasters or subscriptions or something. We're just selling a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that comes with maybe helping a charity or something. That's tougher in my line of thinking.
He says people make the mistake of trying to get applause. You've seen that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I see it in clients.
Right.
If a client has a particularly bad idea, but they're just I've got such a great idea with what to call the project or the organization. I just had that conversation with somebody 2 days ago. And the person I was working with who had talked to the potential client said, "Do you think this is a good name for their new organization?" I said, "I do not, but they do." Mm-hmm. So I said,
Was the name, he talks about the cost of pride, was it a name that made them feel good?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they all sat around, but it's a name that anybody could use. It did not distinguish them at all. So what I said was, we're not going to dissuade them from that, and we're just getting a new relationship with them. There's no trust yet. So I said, let's use their name, but let's have a project name that's what's at the top of the letterhead.
Right. That's a good way around that.
And then we put, such and such is a project of this organization.
I remember the other thing he said was the best ads don't ask people to buy. They provide wanted information. And you see this a lot on the internet. A lot of your ads are like that. They give you like 10, 15 minutes before they even ask. You even have the opportunity. I remember one situation, I wanted to buy the product, but I had to listen to the whole thing. They'd already sold me.
Well, that's a mistake. I just had a potential client yesterday complaining to me about that. He said, I wanted to buy this thing on the internet. I saw their banner ad. I said, I wanted to buy it. And they were making me sit through a 28-minute video.
Yeah, they already, yeah.
And he said they had the sale. I was ready to go. He says, I shut it off.
That is a mistake, but it's an interesting thing. They did provide a lot of wanted information.
The smart ones that have the video, the long video, if you click on leaving, they'll have a box come up and says, do you want to read the rest of this rather than listen to the video? And that way you can scan through it quicker.
He said sounding altruistic is actually most helpful to you. That's why free samples, or like a free brush, like the door-to-door brush salesman, they would give you a sample, and you have the reciprocity principle working for you. Fuller
brush.
Yeah. One of the examples that he gave that was very successful, this book series, you put your name in gold, and the way he sold it was your name has been reserved. To make people feel like they're special is really powerful. That you're going to have your name. It was a way to sell a book that you couldn't sell otherwise. It was a lot more valuable.
Well, some of those national sweepstakes in the mail, you may have already won.
Yeah, it's already there reserved in your name.
So that idea is it hasn't been announced yet, but if you don't enter, then you'll forego the prize. So who wants to forego the prize?
Here's some things he says about psychology, and I think this is probably the most important thing. Curiosity is one of the strongest of human incentives. Would you agree with that?
I've had different things I've read about that, and I have to say from my own experience, and this is just my experience, when I've tried curiosity teasers on a carrier,
they haven't done well?
They don't do well.
I would have to say it has to be truly what you find intriguing, somebody else may not. I mean, a lot of times when somebody says, well, they call that curiosity teaser and it really didn't qualify. So, I mean, I think that's one reason that
could be.
That some people, they've kind of hurt that market. Like if you said, there'd be no dispute if you had a quarter in the mailing, that it's a quarter mailing. But I've heard people say, well, that's a curiosity teaser. I said, well, that's not by I don't find that.
I think they want the quarter.
Yeah. I'm just
self-interest.
saying. Yeah. If it's truly something that's intriguing, yes, I'd agree with that. But I think you're right. He said cheapness isn't a strong appeal. People want they want bargains, but they don't want cheapness.
I think that's true, and I think appeals. I was swimming against the stream at an agency one time where one of my appeals was going to cost more than 3 times what the usual acquisition
and they gave you a hard
cost.
time.
And I still remember sitting in my supervisor's office within about 2 minutes of those costs going on the company
He's there.
intranet.
I know the story.
There's the CFO down the hall. He doesn't get up from his desk. He calls my supervisor on the phone. This is 2 minutes after the cost went on.
Wow, it must be quick.
And so he didn't know I was sitting in the office, and I knew from the answers that she was giving that they were talking about what I had just done.
Well, I think what you'd like about my life in advertising, and even more than scientific, is there was a lot of resistance to any new idea he had, whether it be the largest cake or the special woods for the sweepers. He met resistance all the time. Now, people, they became believers, but there was resistance to any kind of change. Anything that required other people to do work, any kind of commitment to money. So if you're an innovator, you're going to have resistance. And that's one of the things I took away from even a guy who was clearly hardworking and a genius. He faced resistance almost everywhere.
And see, that's not always appreciated.
Oh, yeah.
Hard work. I remember being reviewed by my employer once in a monthly review, and he's looking at something that had failed. And I had broken a lot of the rules of direct marketing.
Well, Mickey Mantle, he had more strikeouts than home runs, I believe, yeah.
Well, yeah, and he was getting on me for it. And I said, look, if you want things that work like such and such, you have to give me the chance to strike out.
Right.
You have to give me the freedom to fail.
Right.
He didn't know what to say to that, but he wasn't happy.
He gave an example of a $1,000 Easter hat, that all the ladies, this is back when $1,000 was a lot of money.
Still is.
Still is a lot of money. Probably was $10,000. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was gold or whatever. And all the ladies were, it was like a huge line. A more recent thing is the $100 Philly steak has been written about. Something, again, the largest cake, things like that create interest, particularly if it's like the first time. I don't know if that would work today. People are, jaded or something. But at that time, if you're the first to do something like that,
I could see 5 guys coming up with its $100 Philly steak.
Yeah, sure. People would try it just to see.
Right.
They tried it, sure. This is an interesting one. A guarantee from like a company doesn't work as well as from like a dealer's signed warrant. One of the businesses he was into was a lot of these medicinal things that I think kind of have a bad odor nowadays. I don't know the kind of stuff you take for your indigestion or something back 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Such tonic.
Yeah. But he had a dealer's warrant. Apparently, if it's from a local, there was more belief in it. That was kind of an interesting thing.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting thing about that. My publisher that I worked for, they did a really interesting experiment. They always had a money-back guarantee.
Right.
But what they did was they said, well, you know what, let's make a double guarantee. So they said, you'll get 100% of your subscription back if after 3 months you don't like it. And then you'll get a prorated one after that. That was their double guarantee. Well, the interesting thing is, when they only had one guarantee in the past, it was a better guarantee because you would get 100% of your subscription back even if you canceled just before the last issue. But they actually found that the double guarantee worked better even though it wasn't as strong as of a guarantee.
Why do you think that is?
I think people saw the double.
The double, just the double guarantee.
And then they went and they did the triple guarantee.
Wow. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it is.
Well, he gave an example. This makes sense because I was in the horse business and I know this. He said a better way to sell a horse is just to lend the horse to somebody, and if you like it, pay me in a week versus returning it. You can have this, buy the horse and return it in a week. Because then it's like I'm putting the trust in you, and people respond usually well to that. I mean, there are a few people that take advantage of it, but most people don't.
My grandfather, he died at 92, and this was 20 years ago. He was a young man off the farm, didn't have any money. He got a job in a paper mill in northern Wisconsin, and he was getting married, and he needed a suit to get married in. And I don't know how much a suit cost back then, but he didn't have it. So he went into a local suit place there in Appleton, Wisconsin. He said, "This is what I work here. This is my name. I need a suit to get married in, but I don't have any money." And the guy who ran the store said, "Okay, I'll tell you what." He said, "You get paid weekly, right, at that mill?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I want you to come in once a week, and I want you to pay me 50 cents. Every time you get paid, I want to get 50 cents from you. You come in to see me." And he said, "If you don't have the 50 cents, he said, I still want you to come in and see me and say, I don't have the money this week." And my grandfather smiled. He said, he didn't want to go in and say, "I don't have the money."
Right.
So he said, but pretty near every week, he had the 50 cents, and he paid off the suit. And so it put it on him, just like you were talking about.
Right. Interesting. He said selfish appeals, and I think we mentioned this, don't work. Like, look out for substitutes. It's better to be specific, and I know you believe in being specific, like an exact figure. I know Herschel Gordon Lewis, he would say the exact date, like Monday, September 14th, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you don't always have, I have found if I've put a deadline in, you don't always have to say why. You can just say, "I would like you to respond by this date."
Right.
Just so long as you have that there.
Yeah. It's better to have a reason if you can.
It is. It's far better.
He talked about, he gave this example of these poor girls, kind of like your grandfather, talking about how they both were buying clothes on installment. But one kind of made the person was like a motherly, matronly, wrote personal letters, and how that approach made the people feel there was a much warmer relationship versus the other one.
It's funny that you mentioned the relationship in the letter. I had a client who was a political museum for one of the presidents of the United States, and they had his Secretary of State was going to sign a letter. And I won't go into all the pros and the cons.
We've already mentioned this person.
Did we? The guilty shall remain nameless but not blameless.
He has a tattoo of a Princeton tiger. I'll give you that clue.
Anyway, I wrote a letter for them. I didn't think he was a good signer, but they insisted, and they said, "Our board is pressuring us. We got to at least put it out. If it loses money, you predicted it, we're not going to come down on you." So he took my 4-page letter, and page 1 was really all about relationship building.
Right.
And building that rapport with the prospective donor. And my 4-page letter got cut down to 2 by this former Secretary of State. He took out every marketing thing that was there, and it was basically, "Dear so-and-so, hi, I'm blah, 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 blah. I served in the Reagan administration. I've put together a book and a tape of his speeches, and send in money and we'll send it to you." That was the letter.
Right.
And when they mailed it, the client called me up and they said, "You hit the nail on the head. That thing
It is interesting
was
that somebody with such intelligence, somebody who believes in expertise, obviously, but does not apply.
He believed in his expertise.
Well, he doesn't. There's a prejudice against
arrogance.
Arrogance about marketing and fundraising and advertising, though. He certainly believed in expertise, but not in other fields. He wouldn't go to a doctor and do this. He wouldn't tell a lawyer this.
And the whole thing, it was a dignified letter. It had to be for this presidential group.
Oh, sure.
It was dignified. It was, it would say things that he would say to somebody
And you're selling his book. You're doing him a favor.
Yes.
Isn't that fascinating?
And disappointing.
Disappointing. Well, that's not the only one. Well, again, I would encourage people, as David Ogilvy said, he read, everybody in the field should read Scientific Advertising 7 times. There was. I do want to say something about Albert Lasker, because he's the guy. Most people don't have this kind of vision to hire somebody for so much money. You know what I'm saying? Most people don't think about paying talent that much. But Claude Hopkins worked around the clock, and I'm sure he made him a lot of money. So that took a certain vision. You could do a show on Albert Lasker as well. He was a giant in the field too. A lot of people think of creative talent as kind of a commodity, when of course it isn't.
No, and I would say to any potential clients out there who happen to listen to this, you may go to an agency because it's well established and has a name, but your experience at that agency will vary wildly.
Oh, yes, I agree.
Just based on where your account is assigned and who has your account. And to recognize things, you can tell pretty quickly if somebody has the love for what they do, or if it's they're going through the motions, it's mechanical. They're kind of stoic. Maybe it's just the paycheck. A lot of that happens with teachers in the public schools. Some people got into teaching because of the love of interacting with young minds. Some people, it's just a paycheck, and you can see that.
Sometimes they wears off.
They get jaded.
Yeah. Talent's important too, though. Let's not forget about talent. It's not just enough to have passion. You have to have talent too.
Yeah, I've generally found, though, that the two go hand in hand.
I agree with you. He said that he thought it was, Claude Hopkins thought that work was more important than intelligence. He would put common sense high in there too, but he thought it was more important to work hard. But if you look at his best ideas, I mean, they're just so clever that he came up with the world's biggest cake. It doesn't seem like that difficult now, but if you're the first to do it, you forget how revolutionary it was. Many of his concepts that he came up with, the cake, the idea of putting somebody's name on the railroad car to sell lard, basically. I mean, it's just amazing.
I remember looking at our student newspaper one year in college, and we had an April Fool issue. Mm-hmm. It was hilarious, cover to cover. Lots of people loved it on campus. I'd get stopped, and people would be laughing. Right. And I remember some of the articles that went there. I was new to the staff. I did not write any of them. But as I thought, well, how do these people do this? And so I would read one of the articles, and I would be laughing. And I thought, oh, well, sure, that's simple. Anybody could do that. Well, no. That person sat down with a cold white piece of paper at a typewriter. This was back in the 70s. And now that it's done, somebody says, oh, yeah.
And the next year it would be easy to do. You could use the same thing.
Maybe so. But the first time?
The first time is hard.
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea of being honest that you're going through bankruptcy.
Yep.
As a way to sell something. Most people would be too shy. They'd be embarrassed to admit that.
That's right.
So of course, nobody thinks of that as a big deal because everybody's seen signs. It's commonplace. A lot of his techniques are so commonplace that they don't work as well as they once did, or they're not seen as creative. They're seen as stale. But they were creative when he came up with them.
They were powerful.
Yeah.
There was a rug dealer in the D.C. area years ago, and about every 6 months, I would hear on the radio, we got it going out of business.
There should be some regulation on that.
About the fourth or fifth time I heard that over 3 years, I said, no, you're not.
Yeah, I don't think it works as well because it's been ruined. But that happens in direct mail, though. A really powerful technique will be overused, and it will stop working for a while. Maybe then it will work a few more years later. I'm sure you've seen that.
Well, I have seen things where clients will... I had one ask me, in fact, to write what they call the Chicken Little letter. Mm-hmm. The sky is falling, because we're going to have to cut the budget or whatever, So you can use it in fundraising, but you can't do it every other month, and it needs to be truthful.
And that's where specificity helps, right?
Yeah, and also, if you're a well-established charity or something that's in the public eye, like a presidential museum, you can't be saying we're going to close our doors. I mean, then people wonder what's wrong with you.
Yeah, that's right. They'd be...
So, one size does not fit all.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Well, I'll tell you what, Stuart, I appreciate you coming up here with Claude Hopkins. We've covered him. We've covered the big three, really, as far as
well,
three of the
maybe
big ones.
in 40 or 50 years, there'll be
Yeah.
doing this, and they'll be talking about the big five. Then we'll have Jim Newberry and Stuart MacLean added to it.
They'll have the Donor Doctor podcast,
Yeah,
perhaps.
there you go.
Yeah, I think unlikely, but who knows? Anyway, till next time, talk to you later. Bye.